In this video, I'm gonna show you how I grew my email newsletter to over 90,000 subscribers without using paid ads. But more important than the list size alone, our email newsletter gets a 50% open rate to 90,000 people every single week, which is definitely above the industry average. And not to brag, but this isn't the first time that I grew a newsletter to tens of thousands of people. My last company, Backlinko, we grew that newsletter to over 200,000 subscribers, also without running any paid ads. You probably already know how valuable having a newsletter can be. I mean, look at companies like Morning Brew and The Hustle. They sold for tens of millions of dollars because those companies that bought them knew how valuable that email-based audience can be. And in the case of Exploding Topics, our newsletter is one of the biggest growth channels for us, basically for two reasons. First, people that open our newsletter on a weekly basis, it's basically like free retargeting. We're reminding them every week that we exist and we're providing a little bit of value. Now, we don't really sell too much in the newsletter. We just basically have a little pitch for our pro product. But the real benefit is that every week people are opening it and getting value and remembering that we exist. So when someone wants some sort of trend spotting tool or trend spotting solution, we're top of mind. In fact, most enterprise customers that reach out to us that end up closing say that they found us via the newsletter or they signed up for the newsletter and really enjoyed reading it every week. And then when they want some sort of trend spotting tool for their team, they don't have to Google trend spotting tool. They just come right to us because they're familiar with us. And also, just because you have a newsletter doesn't mean you just have to send the newsletter. You can also send promotions. I mean, we do product launches 2 or 3 times a year to the Exploding Topics email list. And those are some of our biggest growth months. And because we're providing value between those launches via the newsletter, our open rates are still like 40 or 50% during the launch. And we close a lot of people and convert a lot of people during those launches because we built up so much goodwill over the weeks and months of delivering value with the newsletter. All right, enough fluff. Let's get right into the steps on how you can actually grow your newsletter and get the most out of it. So your first step is when someone signs up for your newsletter is to send them what's known as a CD welcome message. So the C stands for confirmation and the D stands for deliverability. And basically the idea behind this welcome message is 2 things. First, you want to confirm that they made the right decision by signing up. So imagine someone lands on your website and they go to your newsletter page and it sounds interesting and they sign up. If you don't send a message for a few days, which is possible if you only send a weekly newsletter, they're kind of going to forget you exist. So it's important to confirm that they made a good decision and remind them already upon sign up about why they signed up. So in our case, we just kind of remind them, we're going to send trends every week and such a number of people have signed up. So if you don't have a big email list, that's totally fine. You don't need to use social proof. You can just say every week you're going to get X to really confirm that they made the right decision. The next step is to use your welcome message to increase deliverability in the future. 2 things that have really made a huge difference for us is 1, when someone signs up for our newsletter, in the welcome email, we literally tell them to move the message from the promotions tab in Gmail to primary. Now at this point, with a 50% open rate, we're obviously getting to primary most of the time in Gmail, but it still doesn't hurt to put that in there because if you ever get into promotions again, the act of someone moving the message from promotions to primary sends a strong signal, not just for that subscriber, but just in general, that your messages should be in primary. Because most people, when they see something in the promotions tab, they leave it there because usually it's a promotion and they don't want to do anything about it. If a lot of subscribers are literally moving your message and dragging it from promotions to primary, that sends a really strong message to Gmail that your stuff should be in primary. The other thing we do to improve deliverability for Gmail or any other email platform that people might be using is ask them to reply to the message. Reply and say, why did you sign up for this newsletter? This is huge because most emails that get sent out are basically transactional emails that people open, they click, they interact with some way. And all that stuff is good for deliverability, people interacting with your message. But a reply is especially important because it actually shows that people are engaging with your email and it's not just a one-way message. It's sort of a conversation. If enough people do that, it tells Google that these messages are things that are going to be replied to by subscribers, so they should end up in your primary tab. So the goal is really at the end of the day is to get engagement early on from new people that signed up to show Google and Gmail, I should say, that your message should go into the primary tab. And we found that the primary to the promotions tab is huge. Like basically the promotions tab is the new spam folder. You do get some opens there, but to give you some context, when we send a message and it goes to promotions, our open rate is usually like 30-something%. When it goes to primary, it's 50% plus. It's almost double just based on going from promotions to primary. Now, if you go to spam, that's a totally different story, but I'm just talking about how to get deliverability in terms of going from promotions to primary. It makes a huge difference. And this welcome email is sort of a passive way to increase the odds that your messages land in primary in the future. The next step is, what do you actually send these people? And in my experience, the best way to get people to open your newsletter, to share your newsletter, to subscribe to your newsletter is to have what's known as a branded newsletter. So, a lot of newsletters that people create and send out are sort of people's musings on this and that, or a list of links. Think of Substack, for example. Every time you get an email from a Substack, you kind of don't know what you're going to get. Most of them are kind of essays or long rambling stories that someone might have. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to really build a huge newsletter following that you might even be able to sell, or just something like in our case, designed to grow your business, you want to have a branded newsletter. So a branded newsletter is just like it sounds. It's a newsletter that has its own brand. Unless your company is the newsletter, like Morning Brew, your newsletter should have its own separate, unique brand from your actual brand. So for example, Tim Ferriss has 5 Bullet Friday, right? That's his branded newsletter that has its own brand separate from him. And the reason for that, it's just easier to share the newsletter as a separate branded thing. So if I told you, oh, sign up for Tim Ferriss's newsletter, it's easy to forget. But if I told you, sign up for 5 Bullet Friday, it's much easier to remember. It also kind of encompasses what the newsletter is, as opposed to Tim Ferriss's newsletter, which could be anything. You kind of know, okay, it's 5 bullets and it comes on Friday, just from the name alone. So the brand is really important. Now, not just the name, but you also want to have a unique template inside of every message. Every message should be more or less the same, with the fields changed. So in the case of Exploding Topics, or as we call it, Exploding Topics Tuesday, that's our branded newsletter, we send out 4 trends every week. And the 4 trends are all over the place. Some are about e-commerce, some are about technology, some are concepts. But either way, the format is exactly the same. Someone knows what they're going to get. They're going to get 4 new trends every single week. They don't know what the trends are. They don't know what spaces they're going to be in, but they at least have some idea of what they're going to get. And this is a benefit for you and your subscriber. It helps your subscriber because they're going to open because they know, hey, I know what I'm going to get pretty much. I'm just curious about what the details are. This combination of familiarity and the unknown is a really powerful motivator when it comes to someone opening your message. In fact, we don't even have to use any fancy subject lines. Like, our subject line is the most boring thing ever. It's just ET colon the date. As opposed to having to think of one every week, we just use ET and the date, and we still get a 50% open rate because people want to know what's inside the message. The subject line doesn't really matter that much in our case because people know what they're going to get, but they don't know exactly what they're going to get. Having a template also helps you because you don't need to reinvent the wheel every week or every day when you send out your newsletter. Like, you just fill in the blanks and send it out. Our newsletter, because we use content from our pro platform, basically, it only takes us about 5 minutes to put together. It's really easy because you just fill in the blanks, send it out, and you're pretty much done. As opposed to having like an editorial process where you're like, what subject line should we use? What should we cover? You can just basically fill in the blanks and you're done. It's super easy and it's a win-win for you and your subscribers. So while you're sort of developing this template, and it's okay to test out different templates to see what works, I'd really focus on providing bite-sized value. Make it so someone can skim your newsletter and get something out of it. This is the brilliance of newsletters like Morning Brew and The Hustle, is that they were able to take the day's news basically and encapsulate it into easy, digestible little nuggets. Now, in your case, you might not have a newsletter. You might have something about technology or about fitness, and that's totally fine. But the idea is that you want to have bite-sized value that someone can just skim it and get something out of it. So in the case of 5 Bullet Friday, Tim has some links to things he's interested in, and then usually a quote of some kind. Within 30 seconds, you can get some value out of it. And if you want to click on the links and learn more, you can get even more value. So it's bite-sized value across the board there with literally 5 bullets every week. In our case, in Exploding Topics Tuesday, we provide 4 trends. So you can just skim the trends if you want and just see what they are, or we provide some insight and analysis if you want to read about them and learn more. Either way, it's all about providing bite-sized value in your newsletter. So as you develop your template, try to think of a way that you could just help people just quickly get some value out of your newsletter without the need to click on any links or read a bunch of content. The next step is to never miss an issue of your newsletter. Whether it's Christmas or your birthday or your mom's birthday, you got to send that newsletter every week or every day, depending on the time frame that you choose. In the case of Exploding Topics, we've sent out 150 newsletters at this point, and we've never missed one. It's really important for people to build up that habit of opening. So that's one of the reasons, besides what I already mentioned, of why people open up our newsletters at such a high rate. Yes, it's because we provide bite-sized value, we're providing value overall, but we're sending at a consistent day and time. So people know Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern, they're going to get their Exploding Topics Tuesday to open and learn about new trends. Like that habit forming part of it is huge. And in fact, those newsletters that I mentioned, like Morning Brew and The Hustle, they have literally 1 million plus subscribers. And I know from talking to people like who are involved in that company that they have a 40% open rate on 1 million subscribers, and they send every day. How is that possible? Well, it's because that becomes the daily routine of their subscribers, is opening that newsletter. Like they get up in the morning, they check their phone, and they open Morning Brew to learn about what happened yesterday. Like that's the habit forming potential. So if you miss even one issue, you can break that habit. It's important to send at the same time, at the same day of the week, every single day, depending on your schedule. In fact, this is a mistake that I made with the Backlinko newsletter. I would just send out messages sort of when I felt like it, when I had a blog post to share, when I had a video to share, when I had something to rant about, when I learned about something new that I wanted to share. I wasn't consistent, like every week or even every month you get a newsletter. Sometimes you would get 3 in a month. Sometimes you would get 1 per month. Sometimes you would get none for a while, like 6 weeks. So there was no consistency there. And that's one of the reasons that the open rate on the Backlinko newsletter was like 30-something%. And with Exploding Topics, it's above 50. In fact, many of our subscribers tell us that they actually look forward to reading our email on Tuesday. Like they know when it's coming and they look forward to it. And that's only possible if you send really consistently. Last up, if you're serious about growing your newsletter, you need a dedicated page on your website for people to sign up to your newsletter. If you rely 100% on pop-ups, it's going to be hard to build your list. Yes, pop-ups can bring in some subscribers, but nothing beats a dedicated newsletter page. So in the case of Exploding Topics, in our main navigation, we actually have a link to our newsletter page, and most people that sign up for a newsletter sign up through that page. As you can see, this page is really simple. So it's not about the page itself. It's more about funneling traffic to that page, as opposed to having people have to hunt around to sign up for your newsletter or happen to see some sort of pop-up. You have a dedicated section of your site just to get email subscribers. So to quickly recap the most important takeaways that you can use to grow your newsletter, first of all, you definitely want a branded newsletter of some kind. Make sure your newsletter is a brand that is separate from your actual brand, unless of course you're building a newsletter focused business, which if that's the case, you're probably not watching this video to learn newsletter tips from me. Hopefully you're learning from Morning Brew or those guys that just do that. The other thing to remember is your welcome message. Try a CD welcome message. Your welcome message is really important for getting people who just signed up to your newsletter off on the right foot. You want to send a really strong first impression that tells people, look, you signed up for an awesome newsletter, you're going to get all this stuff, and also nudges them to do some things that can help with their deliverability. And also make sure that your newsletter is a template that can provide bite-sized value. That combination is really powerful. When someone knows that I can open this, skim it, and get some value from it, they're more likely to open it in the future because they know it's not a huge time suck. And also you definitely want a dedicated newsletter page on your website, and ideally you'd link from that from your site's navigation. So I know that real estate in your site's navigation is really important, and that's actually why I put the newsletter link there, because for us building our email list and growing our newsletter is really important, so it's worthwhile. So now I'd like to hear from you. Have you built a newsletter? Are you building a newsletter now? What's working for you? Or maybe you have some questions about something you saw in this video. Either way, let me know in the comment section below.